So today's video is a little more serious, a little more darker than my usual videos. We're going to be talking about tragic events and death, so viewer discretion is advised. It seems to me that only the largest, most powerful, most destructive tornadoes get the attention, when in reality, a tornado is still a tornado and it is a very serious situation, even the weak ones. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the deadliest, small, weak tornadoes in history. That includes F0s and F1s. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe for more tornado content. I got a long list of videos right now, so hopefully I can get one out every other week. That's the plan. Now before we get to our first example, we should probably define what an F1 tornado is. Most of the weak/small tornado examples I'm going to use today occurred before the enhanced Fujita scale, so I'll be referring to just F1 instead of EF1. These tornadoes have wind speeds between 75 and 110 miles per hour. This kind of wind speed can knock over trees, it can lift cars, they can do light roof damage, and notably, they can cause a lot of damage to trailers, aka motorhomes, aka mobile homes. They can also cause a lot of damage to boats. Now that we got that figured out, let's move on to the first example. In mid-November 1989, a rare tornado outbreak produced 40 tornadoes from Alabama all the way up to Canada. The deadliest of these tornadoes was an F4 that hit Huntsville, Alabama on November 15th.
The first call for yesterday's tornado came around 4:30. A funnel cloud was sighted near the old airport by Huntsville police officers training at the department's K-9 unit. The training
As you can see, a very active radar picture, the live radar here.
This tornado resulted in 21 fatalities. Overall, 259 homes and 80 businesses were completely leveled in the tornado's 18-mile path. This proved to be the deadliest tornado of the outbreak. However, the second deadliest occurred a day afterwards on November 16th near Monroe, New York. This rare tornado traveled north for just about 9 miles. Towards the end of its path, the tornado struck the East Coldenham Elementary School.
Weather experts blame a tornado for the tragedy at a New York elementary school yesterday. They say it was definitely a tornado that hit Coldenham Elementary School, about 60 miles north of New York City.
As the tornado approached the school, over 100 children were eating lunch in the cafeteria. The teachers and administrators were informed of the approaching storm and tried to get the children to take shelter in a hallway. However, during the moving process, the tornado hit the school and caused a large brick wall to collapse, killing 9 children and injuring 18 others.
7 children died here, 18 others were injured when a glass and concrete wall collapsed in a school cafeteria while elementary school children were eating lunch. All those who died were from 6 to 9 years old.
200 state workers, including 25 ambulances and a helicopter, arrived to the scene shortly after the collapse. This event is often referred to as the East Coldenham Elementary School disaster. The tragedy wasn't over yet though, as one indirect death would occur 2 days later when another student was involved in a car accident by a driver who was distracted by the devastating scene. After the disaster, the family of the victims reached a settlement in 1995 and payments were made by the Valley Central School District, as well as the architect and the structural engineer of the wall. Looking at the school today, this location right here is where the cafeteria and the wall were located. Now, it should be worth noting that there is some controversy as to whether this was a tornado or a downburst. When Fujita and others surveyed the damage, they felt it was more in line with a downburst rather than a true tornado, as they couldn't find a direct path near the school. However, as of today, it still remains technically confirmed as an F1 tornado. The confusion comes up because there was a confirmed F1 tornado that was 9 miles south of the school. So either this happened at the very end of that tornado's path, or it was indeed a downburst. The next tornado I want to talk about is the deadliest F1 tornado in recorded history. This tornado was so deadly that it's actually deadlier than any F2 tornado in recorded history. On June 18th, 1978, around 60 people were getting ready to enjoy dinner and a musical on the Whippoorwill Showboat on Lake Pomona in Osage County, Kansas, about 35 miles south of Topeka. The weather was humid and hot, but overall it seemed nice. Unfortunately, it took a turn for the worse, and around 7 p.m., a small F1 tornado lowered from the cloud base just west of the lake. Not many photos of the tornado exist, however, there are a few photos that show the mist from the lake. As the tornado crossed the lake, it struck the Whippoorwill Showboat, in turn causing the boat to capsize. Of the 60 occupants, 16 would drown and 3 others would be injured. This photo right here was taken shortly after the tornado capsized the boat, and you can see the first bystander boat arriving to help out on the scene. Most of the drownings were caused by being trapped beneath the boat as it rolled on top of them.
And then the wind just hit it and it fell right over.
I managed to grab a breath of air, and I came back up again, and I was drugged there under that time.
Scuba divers and other state workers quickly arrived at the scene and tried to aid in the rescue efforts. As more and more victims were found, the local camp park office became a temporary morgue. Fortunately, they were able to rescue 2 who were trapped in a pocket of air beneath the boat. This is also simply known as the Whippoorwill disaster, and is actually one of the deadliest tornado events in Kansas history. To me, this disaster is very reminiscent of the duck boat disaster that happened on Table Rock Lake in Branson, Missouri. And that wasn't even a tornado, that was actually caused by a derecho.
But first, the death toll rising from that lake tragedy in the middle of a storm last night. It was Branson, Missouri.
During the 2016 duck boat disaster, 17 would lose their lives. Another similar scenario actually happened with a much larger and more violent tornado in 1840. On May 7th, 1840, the Great Natchez Tornado destroyed over 100 boats as it crossed the Mississippi River, causing 250 people to lose their lives. It's possible the death toll was even higher, as slaves were likely not counted as part of the final death toll. Since about 1950, there have been over 325 confirmed F1/EF1 tornado deaths, and there's been about 27 F0/EF0 tornado deaths. And while the Coldenham disaster and the Whippoorwill disaster are the 2 deadliest F1 tornado disasters in recorded history, I do want to mention a few other notable examples. The following examples all share one thing in common. The deaths are all related to mobile homes, aka motorhomes, aka trailers. One recent example happened in 2016 when 3 people died in the small town of Waverly, Virginia, as an EF1 tornado tore through a trailer park.
From Waverly, this is significant stuff. Trees uprooted, cars overturned.
The Waverly tornado was rated an EF1 with wind speeds estimated between 100 and 110 miles per hour. And with these high wind speeds, several motorhomes left their foundation. In fact, one motorhome lifted and flew into the side of a church. And within that motorhome, a 50-year-old man, a 26-year-old man, and a 2-year-old boy were killed. Another example was actually the deadliest tornado in Alabama in 1991. A short-lived F1 tornado touched down near the town of Mumford in Talladega County, Alabama. This F1 tornado was only on the ground for 1 mile. However, unfortunately, along that 1-mile path were several motorhomes. Even though this tornado only had winds around 100 miles per hour, the winds were still strong enough to strip the motorhomes from their foundation and to completely destroy them. Tragically, this tornado would claim 5 lives. 4 of the victims were all from the same home, and a 5th was in a different motorhome down the street. Overall, 8 mobile homes were destroyed and 18 others were injured. It's worth noting that the National Weather Service claims that about 40% of tornado-related fatalities come from mobile homes or motorhomes. So what should you do if you're in a mobile home and a tornado is coming? First of all, you need to have a plan well in advance. Before there's even a tornado watch, you should just have a plan in general. The best thing you can do is leave the motorhome and go to an actual strong structural building, preferably one with a basement. But if there's one nearby that is a legit home with no basement, go to the center of that building on the lowest level. If there's absolutely no structure around, then your best bet is to leave the mobile home and find the lowest lying area around you, a really low ditch. And that might sound crazy to some people. Why would I leave a mobile home to go out into a ditch? Well, if you're in a ditch and you're underground, like you're below the hill, keep in mind the winds are going above the ground level. They're not nearly as bad in the ditch, so it's actually safer than you might think. However, obviously it's not ideal, so end of the day, have a plan. If you are a city, you should really consider putting in tornado shelters near trailer parks. In fact, Tuscaloosa, Alabama has notably already done this near their suburb of Holt after the 2011 super outbreak. And not all motorhome deaths occur with tornadoes. In fact, during the derecho in August 2020, a woman in Fort Wayne, Indiana was killed when high winds tipped over her motorhome. So what about F0 tornadoes? Well, according to the Tornado Archive, aka one of my favorite websites, you should definitely check it out. The deadliest F0 tornado occurred near Thompson, Georgia on May 24th, 1955, and had 3 fatalities. I couldn't find too much info about this tornado online, mostly because it was a day before the deadly Great Plains tornado outbreak. Another notable F0 tornado occurred on May 1st, 1983 in Illinois, and it killed 2 people, as well as one on August 9th, 1983 in Minnesota that also killed 2 people. The final example I want to bring up was an F1 tornado disaster that occurred on May 26, 1974. This is probably the 3rd deadliest F1 tornado with 6 confirmed fatalities. And I'm not exactly sure what happened with this tornado. I couldn't find much information about it. Perhaps it was a water spout. Perhaps it was another tragic boat-related disaster. So if anyone has any more information about this specific tornado, this is likely overshadowed by the 1974 super outbreak as a whole. So yeah, can't find much information, but if you have some information, let me know. And that concludes our video on the deadliest small and weak tornadoes. Just goes to show that you always want to be weather aware, you always want to have a plan, especially if you're in a mobile home, especially if you're on water or in a boat, because sometimes it can be sunny one moment and the next you could be in a bad situation. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next video.